The Grand Hall of the Arcanate Council was the most beautiful room in the galaxy. Crystal pillars rose 100 meters into the air, glowing with soft blue light that came from deep inside the stone itself. The floor was polished so smooth that it reflected everything like a mirror. 12 seats arranged in a half-circle faced a raised throne made of a single piece of living crystal that pulsed with a slow, steady heartbeat of light. This was the seat of Grand Archon Seluveth Khan, ruler of 4,000 star systems, commander of 10 million warships, and master of the Veilthrix Empire. He sat upon his throne now, tall and thin, his gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones. His eyes were solid black, like two holes cut into space itself. He was old, very old. No one in the Empire knew exactly how many centuries he had lived, and no one dared to ask. He listened to the intelligence briefing with the same expression he always wore, bored contempt. "The anomalies are increasing," said Intelligence Overseer Myrith Kalani. She stood at the center of the hall, her data projections floating around her like nervous birds. She was younger than most on the council, and she had earned her position through talent rather than bloodline. This made her dangerous and disliked in equal measure. Gravitational distortions along the edges of Human Quarantine Zone 7. Energy signatures we cannot identify. Encrypted communications in formats our systems have never seen before. A low murmur of amusement rippled through the council members. One of them, a heavy-set Archon, with rings on every finger, leaned forward with a smile. "You are telling us that the monkeys are banging rocks together and making sparks, Overseer. This is hardly worth the council's time." Even Seluveth Khan allowed himself a thin smile. Myrith kept her face calm, but her hands tightened behind her back. "Grand Archon, I respectfully suggest we investigate further. The quarantine buoys have reported minor irregularities in their self-diagnostic cycles. Nothing critical, but the pattern is consistent across multiple sectors. The humans are confined to 12 planets in a single spiral arm," said Fleet Marshal Thyan Sorath from his seat. He was the commander of the Imperial Armada, a decorated soldier with scars on his face and medals on his chest. "They have no faster-than-light capability. Our quarantine buoys confirm this every cycle. They are exactly where we put them, in a cage where animals belong." "Noted and dismissed," said Seluveth Khan. His voice was soft, like dry leaves scraping across stone. "Next matter." Myrith Kalani gathered her projections and stepped back. But as she returned to her seat, she opened a private channel on her communicator and sent a single message to her best analyst. "Double the watch. Something is wrong." The next matter before the council was a diplomatic protest from the humans. Their sole ambassador to the Empire, a woman named Elara Voss, was permitted to address the council once per standard year. She stood now where Myreth had stood moments before, a small figure in a simple dark uniform surrounded by alien giants in glittering robes. She was not impressive to look at. Short brown hair, steady dark eyes, an average build. The Veilthrix towered over her by a full meter. She looked like a child standing among adults. But her voice tarried clearly through the vast hall. "The trade restrictions on medical supplies to human worlds have caused preventable deaths," she said. 14,000 in the last cycle alone. "I am here to formally request, for the 9th consecutive year, that these restrictions be lifted." Seluveth Khan stared down at her from his crystal throne. The silence stretched. Then he spoke. "Your species was granted survival, Ambassador. That is more than most receive from us. Be grateful for what you have. And do not ask for what you have not earned." More laughter from the council. Someone made a comment about animals not understanding generosity. The laughter grew louder. Alara Voss stood perfectly still through all of it. Her face showed nothing. When the laughter died, she gave a small, precise bow. "I understand the Council's position," she said. "I will relay it to my government." She turned and walked out of the Grand Hall. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. No one noticed how steady those footsteps were, or how straight her back remained. No one noticed that she did not look back. Outside the hall, her aide fell into step beside her. A young man with nervous eyes and a datapad clutched to his chest. "How did it go?" he asked, though her face told him everything. "Send the word," Alara Voss said quietly. "They have made their choice." The aide stopped walking. His face went pale. "Ma'am, are you sure? Once we send it, there is no taking it back." "I am sure. Send it now." He nodded once and began typing. The message was short. It traveled through channels that the Veilthrix Empire did not know existed, through relay stations hidden inside asteroids and dead moons, bouncing across the galaxy through a network that had been built in secret over 80 years. It reached its destination in 11 minutes. That destination was a hollowed-out asteroid the size of a small moon, drifting in the cold dark between stars, deep inside the space that the Empire had designated as humanity's cage. Inside this asteroid was the largest military installation ever built by human hands. And inside that installation, standing on the bridge of the battleship UNS Prometheus, was Admiral James Morrow. They called him Blackwall, not because of any dramatic reason, but because his enemies hit him and nothing got through. He was 62 years old, built like a piece of old iron, with gray hair cut short and eyes the color of a winter sky. He read the message once, then he read it again. Then he set down his datapad and looked out the bridge viewport at the fleet assembled before him. Thousands of warships, carriers, battleships, destroyers, cruisers, stealth corvettes, and support vessels, all of them built in secret, all of them powered by technology that the Veilthrix Empire believed humans were too primitive to develop. Faster-than-light drives, shield generators, weapon systems that had been tested in the empty dark where no one was watching. The Empire thought humans had no FTL capability. The Empire was wrong. Humanity had cracked faster-than-light travel 47 years ago. They simply never told anyone. Admiral Morrow opened a fleet-wide channel. Every captain on every ship heard his voice. "This is Blackwall. The word has come. 80 years of preparation come down to this moment. The Empire is rotten to its core, and it is time for the galaxy to know what humanity can do. You know your assignments. You know your targets. And you know the rules. We do not become the monsters we are fighting. Morrow out." He closed the channel and turned to his operations officer. "All of them. All 11,000, sir. All 11,000. Simultaneously." The order went out. 11,000 quarantine boys, the Empire's eyes and ears around human space, died at the exact same moment. Every single one. Not destroyed, simply turned off, like lights in an empty room. Because humanity had owned those boys for 30 years, and the Empire had never noticed. On Sethara Prime, in the Intelligence Bureau's monitoring center, Mireth Kalani watched her screens go dark. Every quarantine telemetry feed, every sensor reading, every data stream from human space, gone. All at once. The silence was total and absolute. Her hands trembled as she reached for the emergency channel. Around her, analysts began to shout and scramble. Alarms started screaming, but Mireth just stared at the black screens and whispered the words that no one else in the Empire was ready to hear. The first 72 hours were the worst, because there was nothing to fight. Fleet Marshal Fian Sorath stood in the Imperial War Room on Sethara Prime, surrounded by holographic maps that showed the entire Empire in glowing blue light. Thousands of star systems, millions of trade routes, billions of citizens, all of it under his protection. And right now, all of it was blind on one side. The quarantine zone around human space was a wall of darkness on the map. No data, no signals, nothing. Send scout groups into the quarantine zone, Sorath ordered. Full sensor sweeps. I want to know what is out there. The scouts went in. 12 fast destroyer groups, each one capable of reducing a planet to ash. They spread out across the vast region of space that had been humanity's cage for over a century. They found nothing. Empty space stations, cold engine signatures, abandoned mining platforms. The human worlds were still there. The planets, the cities, the infrastructure. But the people were gone. The ships were gone. It was as if 200 billion humans had simply packed up and vanished into the dark. That is impossible, said Grand Archon Seleveth Khan when the reports reached the council. A species does not disappear. They are hiding in their holes like the vermin they are. Increase the search. But privately, the Arcanate was beginning to crack. The hardliners demanded an immediate punitive strike. Burn the human worlds. Leave nothing standing. The moderates argued for caution. You cannot punish what you cannot find. And Mireth Kalani, who had warned them all and been laughed at, was now the only person in the room that everyone listened to. Find them, Seleveth Khan told her, and for the first time in her career, she heard something in his voice that sounded like fear. She pulled every analyst in the Bureau onto the problem. They tore apart the quarantine buoy data, looking for anything they might have missed. And that was when the real horror began. The buoys were compromised, Mireth told the War Council 3 days later. Her voice was flat and controlled, but her eyes told a different story. Not recently. We estimate the humans gained access to the quarantine monitoring network approximately 30 years ago. They have been feeding us false data ever since. Every reading we received, every confirmation that the humans had no FTL capability, every scan showing primitive technology, all of it was manufactured. The silence in the war room was absolute. 30 years, Fleet Marshal Sorath repeated. At minimum, said Mireth. But it gets worse. It got much worse. As her analysts dug deeper, they discovered that the quarantine buoys were only the beginning. The humans had not just infiltrated the monitoring network. They had infiltrated everything. Ghost programs had been sleeping inside the Empire's military communication systems for decades. Tiny, almost invisible pieces of code that did not destroy anything or steal anything obvious. They simply watched. They mapped. They recorded. Every fleet position, every supply route, every classified defense protocol, every officer's name and assignment, every weakness in every shield grid around every military installation in the Empire. The humans had been inside the walls of the fortress for 30 years, and no one had noticed because they had not taken anything. They had only looked. The quarantine was never a cage, Mireth said to Sorath in a private meeting, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a blind. We locked them in, and then stopped watching carefully, because we thought the cage was enough. They used that blind spot to build something we never imagined. What did they build? Sorath asked. I do not know yet, but whatever it is, they are ready to use it. The signs of infiltration began to show everywhere, like cracks spreading through glass. Communication relays across the Empire started to stutter and drop connections for a few seconds at a time. Supply chain logistics systems made small errors. A shipment of fuel sent to the wrong depot. A food delivery redirected to an empty station. Navigation beacons in remote sectors transmitted slightly wrong coordinates, sending merchant convoys on detours through empty space. None of it was dramatic. None of it looked like an attack. Each incident by itself was minor, the kind of glitch that happened in any large system. But together, across thousands of systems, the effect was like poison spreading through blood. The Empire's perfect machine was grinding against itself, and the friction was growing every hour. Captain Yurith Novan felt it on his destroyer, the Blade of Certainty, patrolling the inner border sectors. Novan was young for a ship commander, barely 40, with the lean build and sharp features common to Vaelthric's military families. He had joined the fleet because he believed in the Empire's mission: order, stability, civilization. He had never questioned it. He was beginning to question it now. His patrol route had been changed 3 times in 2 days, due to communication errors. His supply requisitions were stuck in processing loops, and his crew was nervous. Rumors were spreading faster than official information, which meant that official information was not spreading at all. On the 3rd night of the crisis, his sensor officer called out a contact. A single ship, small, had decloaked directly in front of them, at a distance of 10,000 kilometers. Human vessel, the sensor officer reported, and every person on the bridge went still. It was tiny. A Corvette-class ship, sleek and dark, with a hull design that Novan had never seen in any database. It sat there in space, perfectly motionless, as if it were waiting for them. "Weapons lock," Novan ordered. "Attempting lock, Captain. The target is—" "I cannot get a solid lock. Their hull is absorbing our targeting signals." Before Novan could give another order, the human ship broadcast a data packet on every frequency simultaneously. Military, civilian, emergency, diplomatic, all of them. Then, without a sound, it flickered and vanished. Not cloaked, not warped away, simply gone, as if it had never existed. The Blade of Certainty's sensors showed nothing. Empty space. The data packet contained a single file. When Novan's communications officer opened it, the bridge went completely silent. It was a diagram. A complete, accurate, and highly classified diagram of the entire Vaelthric's Imperial military command structure. Every fleet, every base, every commanding officer. And next to each entry was a set of coordinates, real-time fleet positions, updated to within the hour. The humans were not just inside the Empire's networks. They knew where every single warship was, right now, at this very moment. Captain Novan stared at the diagram for a long time. Then he ordered it forwarded to Fleet Command with a single annotation. "They want us to know that they know." The message was clear enough for anyone to understand. The humans were saying, "We see you, all of you, and you cannot see us at all." The Arcanate convened an emergency war council. Every military commander, every intelligence chief, every senior official in the Empire gathered in the Grand Hall. Selaveth Khan sat on his crystal throne and listened to report after report, each one worse than the last. His black eyes moved from face to face, and for the first time in living memory, the Grand Archon of the Vaelthric's Empire looked afraid. "How?" he asked. Just one word. How? No one had an answer. Fleet Marshal Sorat stood at the war table and tried to organize a defense, but it was like trying to build a wall when you did not know which direction the enemy was coming from. The humans could be anywhere. They could be everywhere. "We must assume," Sorath said heavily, "that everything we thought we knew about humanity was wrong. Every assessment, every analysis, every assumption, all of it, wrong." The War Council argued through the night. They argued about strategy, about blame, about who had failed and how. They did not notice that the deep space sensor arrays on the Empire's far frontier had begun to register something strange. Not natural ones, the kind produced by objects moving through faster-than-light travel. But these were enormous. Each wave signature corresponded to an object the size of a small moon. The first one appeared on the far edge of Imperial space. Then another. then dozens. By the time the sensor data reached Sathara Prime, the gravity wave signatures numbered in the hundreds, and they were coming from every direction at once. Something massive was moving through the dark between the stars. Something was coming, and it was coming from everywhere. General Huo Zhenfeng stood on the command deck of the carrier UNS Great Wall and watched the fleet move into position. Around him, the largest military force in human history was spreading out across the galaxy like a hand reaching for a throat. He was a calm man, a thinking man, and he took no pleasure in what was about to happen. But he felt no guilt either. The Empire had been given a chance. Ambassador Voss had given them a chance, year after year, standing in their grand hall and asking for nothing more than the right to live. And year after year, they had laughed at her. They were not laughing now. "All fleet groups report ready," his operations officer said. General Huo nodded once. The Empire woke to a nightmare it had never imagined possible. At exactly the same moment across 200 star systems, the sky split open. Ships poured out at faster-than-light travel, not at the borders of Imperial space, not at the defended checkpoints and fortified stations where the Veilthrix military waited, but deep inside the Empire itself, past every defensive line, past every fortress, past every wall that the greatest military power in the galaxy had built over centuries of conquest. The humans had not come through the front door. They had appeared in the living room. On Sathara Prime, Fleet Marshal Sorath watched his strategic display light up with red markers like a disease spreading across a body. 200 systems simultaneously. Shipyards, fuel depots, communication relay stations, fleet academies, weapons manufacturing platforms. Every target was military, every strike was precise, and every attack came from a direction that the Empire's defenses were not facing. "How are they inside our perimeter?" Sorath demanded. "They did not cross the perimeter, sir," his aide said, his voice shaking. "They were already inside. Their fleet staging areas were hidden in deep space within Imperial territory. They have been positioning themselves for weeks, maybe months." The scope of it was staggering. The humans had moved thousands of warships through the Empire's own space, past its sensors, past its patrols, past everything, and nobody had seen them. The ghost programs in the Imperial networks had not just been mapping the Empire's defenses. They had been creating blind spots, tiny gaps in sensor coverage that a careful fleet could slip through, like water through cracks in stone. Commodore Aisha Nazari led Strike Group Fenrir into the Cathara shipyards, the largest military construction facility in the Outer Empire. Her fleet dropped out of FTL in perfect formation, 40 warships moving like a single creature. The shipyards were defended by a garrison of 80 Imperial vessels. It should have been a difficult fight. It lasted 9 minutes. Nazari's ships fired weapons that the Veilthrix had never seen before. Phase shift torpedoes that did not hit shields. They passed through them as if they were not there, striking hulls directly. Directed singularity cannons that created tiny, brief black holes at the point of impact, tearing warships apart from the inside. And the human ships themselves moved in ways that should not have been possible, flickering in and out of real space during combat, appearing in one location, and then simply being somewhere else a moment later. The Veilthrix garrison fought bravely. They were professional soldiers, well-trained and well-equipped. It did not matter. The technology gap was not a gap. It was a canyon. The humans had not just matched Veilthrix military technology. They had jumped past it by generations. But what happened after the battle was the thing that confused the Veilthrix more than anything else. The humans did not destroy the shipyards. They disabled them. Precision strikes on power generators, construction arms, and weapon systems. Then they broadcast on every frequency. All civilian personnel were to evacuate immediately. Medical ships with human markings, moved into position and began offering assistance to wounded Vilethric sailors. Survivors were treated and released. Across 200 systems, the same thing happened. Human fleets struck hard and fast, destroying military targets with terrifying efficiency. And then they stopped. They opened evacuation corridors. They broadcast warnings before hitting stations, giving crews time to reach escape pods. They sent medical ships to rescue people who, an hour earlier, had been shooting at them. Admiral Moro's orders were absolute and clear, transmitted to every human captain before the operation began. 0 civilian casualties. If there was any doubt, any chance that a target contained civilians, it was not to be hit. Period. No exceptions. Any captain who violated this order would face court-martial. This was not extermination. This was not revenge. This was disarmament. The Vilethrics did not understand it. Their own history was full of conquest, and conquest meant destruction. When the Empire took a world, it broke that world completely. Its military, its culture, its spirit. That was how Empire worked. You crushed everything so that nothing could rise against you. The idea that you could have the power to destroy and choose not to was something that simply did not fit inside the Vilethrics' way of thinking. Fleet Marshal Sorath understood, though. He understood because he was a soldier, and soldiers recognized other soldiers. He looked at the pattern of human attacks and saw the mind behind them. Disciplined, methodical, and restrained. The humans were not trying to kill the Empire. They were trying to disarm it without unnecessary death. And that, Sorath realized with a cold feeling in his chest, was far more frightening than simple destruction. It meant the humans were confident enough in their victory that they could afford to be merciful. He gathered what remained of the Imperial Armada's central fleet, 800 warships, the best the Empire had, and moved to intercept the largest human force at the Viridian Threshold, a strategic choke point between 2 major Imperial sectors. If he could stop them here, he could buy time for the rest of the Empire to regroup. The human force at the Threshold numbered 200 ships. Sorath had 4 times their number. For the first time since the invasion began, the odds seemed to favor the Empire. The battle lasted 3 hours. It was the largest naval engagement in galactic history, and it was a massacre. The human ships fought with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. They moved as one, reacting to changes in the battle faster than Vilethrics' commanders could issue orders. Their own defenses absorbed punishment that should have destroyed them 10 times over. They used tactics that no military academy in the Empire had ever theorized. Fleet movements in 3 dimensions that used FTL microjumps to reposition mid-battle, appearing behind enemy lines, above them, below them, everywhere at once. When it was over, the Vilethrics had lost 600 ships. The humans had lost 11. Fleet Marshal Sorath sat on the bridge of his damaged flagship and stared at the wreckage that filled space around him. 600 ships, tens of thousands of lives, gone in 3 hours against a force a quarter of his size. He was a proud man, a man who had dedicated his life to the Empire's military, and he had just witnessed the complete and total defeat of everything he had built. He opened a broadcast channel, not encrypted, not military, open, so that everyone could hear. His own people, the humans, and the Arcanate on Sethera Prime. This is Fleet Marshal Thyan Sorath. I am addressing the Arcanate Council directly. What I have witnessed today is beyond anything our military can counter. We are not facing primitives. We are not facing equals. We are facing a force that surpasses us in every measure of warfare. I urge the Council, in the name of all our dead, to surrender. On Sethera Prime, the Arcanate Council heard his words. The moderates pleaded for negotiation. The hardliners screamed about treason. and Grand Archon Seleveth Khan sat on his crystal throne and felt the foundations of his world cracking beneath him. He would not surrender. He could not. Surrender was a concept that the Veilthrix had forced upon 1,000 species, but it was not a concept that applied to the Veilthrix themselves. They were the rulers. They were the masters. They did not bow. Seluveth Khan activated the Ashfire Protocol. It was the Empire's deepest secret. A network of planet-killing weapons hidden across the galaxy, buried in the cores of moons and asteroids, each one capable of turning a world into a cloud of burning dust. If the Empire fell, then everything would fall with it. If the Veilthrix could not rule the galaxy, then there would be no galaxy left to rule. But Archon Secundus Valeth Tan, Seluveth Khan's own heir, watched him enter the activation codes and felt something break inside her. She was a pragmatist, a survivor, and she could see the future clearly enough to know that the old empire was finished. Destroying the galaxy would not save it. It would only prove that the humans had been right about the Veilthrix all along. She slipped out of the council chamber and opened a hidden communication channel. She had never spoken to Ambassador Elara Voss directly, but she had prepared for this possibility. She sent the Ashfire codes, the locations of every platform, and a single message: "Stop him, please." Commodore Nazari received the coordinates 17 minutes later. Strike Group Fenrir broke into 6 subgroups and raced across multiple star systems in a desperate chase. The Ashfire platforms were waking up, their massive weapons charging with enough energy to crack worlds open. Nazari's ships fought through defending forces at each location. Brutal, fast engagements with no room for error. The last platform was the largest, hidden inside a dead moon orbiting a dying star. Nazari's ships arrived with seconds to spare, their weapons cutting through the moon's surface to reach the device buried within. The platform's charging sequence reached 98% before a direct hit from the UNS Fenrir's main cannon tore its power core apart. The galaxy held its breath, then exhaled. But on Sethara Prime, Seluveth Khan received the news that his Ashfire platforms had been destroyed, and something changed behind his black eyes. He descended into the deepest chamber of the Arconate Citadel, a place that no one had entered in 1,000 years. There, beneath the crystal throne, lay the artifact that the Veilthrix had built their entire civilization upon, an object left behind by a species so ancient that even their name had been forgotten. He placed his hands upon it, and spoke words that had not been spoken since the founding of the Empire. The crystal core of Sethara Prime began to sing. The sound was not a sound. It was a vibration that passed through stone and metal and flesh and space itself. Across the planet, people stopped and looked up. Across the system, sensors went wild with readings that made no sense. Something old had awakened, something that was never meant to be awakened again. The Veilthrix Empire did not fall because of human weapons. It fell because it was already broken, and the humans simply showed everyone the cracks. Across the galaxy, the species that had lived under Imperial rule for centuries watched the human victories and felt something they had not felt in generations: hope. The Cathari, tall, insect-like beings who had been conquered 400 years ago and forced into labor camps, rose up on 11 worlds in a single night. The Dulvine, a peaceful aquatic species whose homeworld had been drained of its oceans to fuel Imperial industry, seized control of 3 orbital stations and broadcast a declaration of independence. The Rincol, small, clever creatures who had served as the Empire's slave engineers for 200 years, simply stopped working. Every factory, every shipyard, every power station that relied on Rincol labor went silent. The Empire had ruled through fear for so long that it had forgotten a simple truth. Fear only works as long as the fearful believe you are strong. The moment that belief broke, everything built upon it crumbled like sand. Ashka Len was the one who broke it. She was a Veilthrix civilian, a journalist who had spent her career writing approved stories for approved outlets, the kind of careful, controlled truth that the Empire permitted. She was not a rebel. She was not brave, or at least she had never thought of herself that way. But she had a conscience, and that conscience had been getting louder every year. When the human invasion began, Eshka's editors told her to write about the barbaric alien attackers threatening Veilthrix civilization. She sat down at her terminal and tried. The words would not come. Instead, she found herself thinking about Ambassador Voss, standing in the Grand Hall, asking for medicine for dying children, and being laughed at. Then the files arrived. Myreth Kalani sent them. The intelligence overseer had spent the last week watching the empire she had served her entire life reveal itself to be something far worse than she had imagined. The classified archives she had accessed in her desperate search for information about the humans had shown her other things. Things that had nothing to do with humans, and everything to do with what the Veilthrix had done to the galaxy. Genocide records. The true history of the Cathari conquest. Not the peaceful integration taught in schools, but the systematic destruction of their civilization. 3 billion dead. Chemical weapons used on civilian populations. Children separated from families and raised in Imperial conditioning facilities. Cultural erasure programs. The Dolvines' entire written history. Their art, their music, their language. All of it deliberately destroyed and replaced with Veilthrix-approved alternatives. A species with a 10,000-year cultural heritage, reduced to servants who could not even remember their own songs. Weaponized famine. Worlds that resisted Imperial rule had their food supplies cut off, not as a military tactic, but as punishment. Entire planets starved into submission, while Imperial officials watched and took notes on compliance timelines. Myreth sent all of it to Eshka Len with a single message. The truth. Do what you will. Eshka did what she did best. She wrote. She organized the files, verified what she could, and built a broadcast that was clear, simple, and devastating. She did not use dramatic language or emotional appeals. She simply presented the facts, one after another, in the plain, basic truth that no amount of Imperial propaganda could argue against. She broadcasted on every channel she could reach, and because the Empire's communication networks were already full of holes from the human infiltration, her broadcast went further than any unauthorized transmission in Imperial history. It reached hundreds of worlds. It reached billions of people. The effect was like setting fire to dry wood. Within hours, protests erupted on Veilthrix worlds. Citizens who had believed in their empire's goodness suddenly had to face the reality of what had been done in their name. Some refused to believe it. Many did. And the subject species, who had always known the truth but had never heard it spoken aloud by a Veilthrix voice, found their rage given permission to exist. The Empire was now fighting on 3 fronts. The humans from outside, the rebellions from within, and the collapse of its own story about itself. But none of these were the greatest threat. On Sethara Prime, the crystal core that Seleveth Khan had awakened was growing in power. Dr. Samuel Okoye, chief science officer aboard the UNS Prometheus, was the first human to detect what was happening. Okoye was a quiet man with kind eyes, and a mind that worked in patterns most people could not follow. He had spent his career studying the traces of ancient civilizations, the precursors, as humanity called them, species that had risen and fallen long before any current civilization had evolved. Most of what the precursors left behind was dead and harmless, but some of it was not. The readings from Sethara Prime are wrong, Okoye told Admiral Morrow, pointing at data streams on his console. The crystal core is generating a spatial distortion field. It is expanding, slowly for now, but the rate of expansion is increasing. In simple terms, Doctor, it is unmaking space itself, Admiral. The fabric of reality inside the field is being pulled apart at a fundamental level. Stars within the affected area are already showing instability. If the field continues to expand at its current rate of acceleration, it will consume the entire Cythera system within 48 hours. After that, based on the energy output I am seeing, it could consume the sector, then the quadrant, then everything. You are telling me that Selaveth Khan activated a weapon that will destroy the galaxy. I am telling you that he activated something the precursors built, and that the Veilthrix clearly never fully understood. I do not believe it was designed as a weapon. I believe it was designed as an extinction protocol, a way to erase a region of space completely if something went wrong. The Veilthrix built their civilization on top of it, and used its energy without knowing what it truly was. Now it has been woken up, and it is doing what it was made to do. Morrow closed his eyes for 3 seconds. When he opened them, his face was made of stone. All fleet elements, this is Blackwall. New orders. Forget the Empire. Forget the war. We have a new enemy, and it is a doomsday device that will kill everything in this galaxy if we do not stop it. All ships, every single one we have, converge on Cythera Prime. Maximum speed. The word went out across the human fleet, and it went out across what remained of the Imperial communication networks as well. Because Morrow broadcasted openly. He wanted the Veilthrix to hear it. He wanted everyone to hear it. Valith Tan heard it on Cythera Prime. She had been hiding in a secure bunker since leaking the Ashfire codes, waiting for either rescue or execution. When she heard Morrow's broadcast, she understood what her grandfather had done, and she understood what she had to do. She broadcast her own message, not to the humans, but to every Imperial fleet commander still loyal to the throne. This is Archon Secundus Valith Tan. The Grand Archon has activated the Precursor Core. He is destroying Cythera Prime. He is destroying everything. I am ordering all Imperial forces to stand down and assist the human fleet in reaching the capital. This is not a surrender. This is survival. The ones who were tired of fighting, the ones who had read Eshkalen's broadcast, the ones who had watched 600 ships die at the Viridian threshold and understood what it meant. They powered down their weapons and opened their defensive lines. Some did not. The loyalists, the true believers, the ones who would rather die than accept that the Empire was wrong. Civil war erupted within the Imperial fleet itself. Veilthrix ships fired on Veilthrix ships. Brothers killed brothers over the question of whether to let the humans through. Through this chaos, a joint fleet pushed towards Cythera Prime. Human warships and Veilthrix defectors flew side by side, fighting through loyalist blockades together. Captain Novan commanded a squadron of Imperial destroyers alongside Commodore Nazari's strike group. Now they flew in formation, their ships targeting computers linked, their crews working together with the desperate efficiency of people who knew that failure meant the end of everything. "You fly well for an Imperial captain," Nazari told Novan over a private channel after his squadron cleared a path through a loyalist minefield. "You fight well for a species we were told had no ships," Novan replied. Despite everything, Nazari laughed. It was a short laugh, tired and grim, but it was real. The UNS Prometheus led the fleet into the Cythera system. What they found there stopped every conversation on every bridge. Cythera Prime was wrapped in light, not normal light, a twisting, churning corona of energy that bent space visibly around it. Stars in the background warped and stretched, as if seen through broken glass. The planet itself was still there, still intact, but the space around it was sick. Reality was coming apart at the seams, fraying like old cloth. And at the center of it all, The crystal core pulsed with a light so bright that sensors could not measure it. Admiral Morrow stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and looked at the view screen. Behind him, the largest fleet ever assembled, human and Veilthrix together, waited for his order. "We did not come this far to watch the galaxy die," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "All ships, forward, into the anomaly, whatever it takes." The fleet moved forward, into the broken light, into the impossible. The distortion zone was a place where the rules of the universe had stopped working. Ships entered the field around Sathara Prime and immediately began to suffer. Hulls groaned as space itself stretched and compressed around them in waves. Navigation systems went mad, showing positions that changed from second to second. 3 destroyers on the fleet's outer edge were caught in a gravity shear, a fold in spacetime that twisted them apart like paper in a storm. The crews did not even have time to scream. Admiral Morrow gripped the railing on the Prometheus bridge and watched the casualty reports scroll across his display. Every name was a person. Every ship was a crew that had trusted him. He forced himself to keep watching, because looking away from the cost of his decisions was a luxury he did not deserve. "Dr. Okoye," he said, "I need a path through this." Okoye had been working frantically at a station, running calculations that pushed the limits of what human mathematics could describe. The distortion field was not random. It had a structure, a pattern, like the grain in wood or the current in a river. If he could map it, the fleet could navigate through the safer channels between the worst distortions. Now, 4 minutes later, the fleet linked together through its quantum drives, each ship becoming a fixed point that the others could navigate by. The distortion still raged around them, but now they had a path, narrow, dangerous, but passable. The fleet pushed forward in a long column, the largest ships at the center providing the strongest anchor points, the smaller ships sheltering in their wake. They lost more ships. A carrier that drifted too far from the formation was crushed by a space-time fold. A group of corvettes were caught in a temporal eddy that aged their hulls 1,000 years in seconds, turning them to dust. But the column held, and the fleet moved through the impossible toward the heart of the storm. Sathara Prime grew in the view screens, wrapped in its corona of broken light. The Arcanate Citadel was visible even from orbit, a tower of crystal rising from the planet's surface, connected by threads of energy to the core deep beneath the ground. It looked like a wound in the world, a place where something wrong was growing. Morrow assembled his ground team, 50 soldiers, the best humanity had, in powered assault armor. He would lead them personally. His officers argued against it. A fleet admiral had no business in a ground assault. Morrow ignored them. This was his operation, his responsibility, and if it killed him, then it killed him. The dropship screamed through Sathara Prime's atmosphere, which was already beginning to behave strangely. Clouds moved in spirals that defied wind patterns. The air itself felt thick and wrong, heavy with energy that made teeth ache and eyes water. They landed at the base of the citadel and fought their way in. Seluveth Khan's personal guard was waiting for them. They were gene-enhanced Veilthrix warriors, bigger and faster than normal, wearing armor made from precursor technology that shimmered with the same crystalline light as the core. They were the finest soldiers the Empire had ever produced, each one worth a dozen ordinary troops. The fighting was close, brutal, and bloody. Human assault rifles fired kinetic rounds that cracked precursor armor at close range. Veilthrix energy lances burned through powered armor like sunlight through fog. Soldiers from both species died in hallways of crystal and light, their blood mixing on floors that hummed with ancient power. Morrow took a lance burn across his left arm that melted his armor to his skin. He had not come this far to stop. They reached the throne room, a vast chamber at the heart of a citadel, directly above the precursor core. The floor was transparent crystal, and through it, Morrow could see the core itself, a sphere of light so intense that it had no color, just pure, raw energy, pulsing like a living heart. Selivith Khan stood at the center of the room, or rather, what had been Selivith Khan. The Grand Archon had fused with the precursor artifact. Threads of crystal grew from his skin, connecting him to the floor, the walls, the core below. His eyes blazed with white light. He was part of the machine now, and the machine was part of him. "You are too late," Khan said. His voice was not his own anymore. It resonated with frequencies that made the air vibrate. "The core is awake. It cannot be stopped. This galaxy will be cleansed, and when it is done, there will be nothing left. Not your species, not mine. Nothing." Morrow looked at him, at the crystal growing through his flesh, at the madness in his burning eyes, at the ruins of what had once been the most powerful man in the galaxy, now reduced to a component in a machine he had never understood. He did not feel anger, he felt pity. "You could have shared the galaxy," Morrow said. "You could have traded with us, learned from us, let us learn from you. We asked for medicine for our children, and you laughed. We asked to be treated as equals, and you called us animals. And now you are destroying everything because you cannot stand the thought of a universe where you are not the master of it." Khan screamed. It was a sound of rage and pain and something deeper, the sound of a being who had defined himself entirely by his superiority and now had nothing left. "You were supposed to be nothing," Khan howled. "Primitives, insects, how dare you? How dare you rise above us?" "We did not rise above you," Morrow said quietly. "We were always beside you. You just never looked." The chamber shook. The core pulsed brighter. Through the transparent floor, Morrow could see the light expanding, eating reality, growing every second. They were out of time. Ambassador Elara Voss arrived through a side entrance with Valith Tan and Dr. Okoye. They had come up through maintenance tunnels, avoiding the fighting above. Voss was bruised and bleeding from a fall. Valith Tan moved with the careful determination of someone who had already accepted what she was about to do. Dr. Okoye carried a scanning device and was reading the core's energy patterns. "The core responds to the Archon bloodline," Okoye said quickly. "It was keyed to their genetic signature when the Veilthrix first found it. Someone with that signature can interface with it, can tell it to shut down. But the interface is direct. Mind to machine. It will resist. The precursor systems were not designed for organic minds." Every eye in the room turned to Selivith Khan, still fused with the crystal, still burning with mad light. He would never shut it down. He wanted the end. Valith Tan stepped forward. "I carry the bloodline," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Valith, no." Voss reached for her arm. "We do not know what it will do to you." "I know exactly what it might do to me," Tan said. She looked at Voss with eyes that were clear and calm, and terribly sad. "But this is my empire's sin, my bloodline's creation. If anyone is going to fix this, it should be one of us." She walked to the center of the chamber, stepping past the writhing form of her grandfather, and knelt on the crystal floor. She placed her hands flat against the surface, and the crystal responded instantly. Light climbed up her arms like living fire. She gasped in pain. Her body arched. The threads of crystal that connected Khan to the core flickered and began to shift, reaching for her instead. Khan screamed again, a scream of loss this time, as the machine he had made himself part of recognized a newer, stronger signal and began to listen to it instead. Valith Tan fought, not with weapons, not with ships, but with her mind, against a machine that was older than her entire species. The core pushed back. It wanted to run. It wanted to complete its purpose. It had been sleeping for millions of years, and now it was awake, and it wanted to finish what it had been made to do. She told it no. It was not a command. It was not a code. It was a simple, absolute refusal from a mind that was small and fragile and mortal, but absolutely certain. No, this ends. Go back to sleep. The light blazed so bright that everyone in the chamber had to look away. The floor shook. The walls cracked. Crystal shattered and reformed and shattered again. Then silence. The light faded. The humming stopped. The threads of crystal withdrew from Valeth Tan's skin and retreated into the floor, like roots pulling back into the earth. The core beneath the transparent floor dimmed from blinding white to soft blue to dark to nothing. Selaveth Khan collapsed. The crystal that had grown through his body crumbled to dust. He lay on the floor, just an old man now, breathing shallow and broken, staring at a ceiling he could no longer see. Valeth Tan lay where she had knelt. Okoye rushed to her side and checked her vitals. She was alive, burned and scarred, her hands marked with patterns where the crystal had touched her, but alive. Outside the citadel, across the Sethara system, the distortion field collapsed. Space healed itself in ripples, like water settling after a stone has been thrown into it. The stars steadied. The planets stopped shuddering. The galaxy, which had been moments from unraveling, held together. On the bridge of the Prometheus, the crew watched their sensors return to normal readings and allowed themselves, for the first time in hours, to breathe. The war was over. 1 year later, Ambassador Ilara Voss stood at a podium in a hall that had been built on neutral ground, a space station constructed jointly by 12 species at the intersection of what had once been Imperial territory. Behind her, representatives of 100 worlds sat in a vast chamber that looked nothing like the Arcanate's grand hall. There was no crystal throne, no raised seats, just a circle of equals. The Galactic Concord is not an empire, Voss said. It has no throne, it has no master. It is a promise that we will talk to each other before we fight, that we will trade with each other instead of stealing, and that we will never again allow one species to hold a galaxy in chains. The applause was not thunderous. It was quiet, uncertain, hopeful. The sound of people who had suffered too much to celebrate easily, but who were willing to try. Valeth Tan sat in the Valethrix delegation seat. Her hands still bore the crystalline scars, and she wore them openly. She caught Voss's eye across the chamber, and the two women shared a small nod. Not of friendship, not yet, but of understanding. They had torn down an empire together. Building something better would take longer and be harder, but they were both still standing. His last official act was to declassify the entire history of the Obsidian Vanguard, every secret program, every hidden shipyard, every name of every person who had worked in silence for 80 years to keep humanity alive. The galaxy would know what humans had done and how and why. No more secrets, no more shadows. Captain Navan and Commodore Nazari were given joint command of the Concord's first peacekeeping fleet, a mixed force of human and Valethrix ships with crews from a dozen species. It was messy and complicated, and the cultural differences alone were enough to drive anyone mad. They made it work anyway, because the alternative was worse. Nirith Kalani helped build the Concord's intelligence framework, and Eshka Len helped build its free press charter. The overseer who had watched from the shadows and the journalist who had shown light into them worked side by side to make sure that no government could ever again hide what it truly was. Fleet Marshal Sorath disappeared from public life. He went to a quiet world on the galaxy's edge and wrote a single book. It was a memoir of the war, of the 600 ships lost at the Viridian threshold, of the empire he had served and the lies it had told him. He titled it simply, In the Name of All Our Dead. It became the most widely read book in Concord space within a year. And on Sethera Prime, in the ruins of the Arcanate Citadel, Dr. Samuel Okoye made his final visit to the dormant precursor core. The crystal was dark now, cold and dead as ordinary stone. Every scan showed zero energy, zero activity, zero anything. It was finished. As he turned to leave, something flickered in the corner of his eye. Deep inside the crystal, at the very center of the core, a single point of light pulsed once, faint, brief, barely there, and then went still. Okoye stood very still for a long time. Then he made a note in his log, sealed the chamber, and walked away. Some doors were better left closed. Some things were better left sleeping. Behind him, the crystal sat in the dark, silent and patient, and waited. The empire had crumbled without a trace, but the galaxy remembered everything.